And in this episode, we're going to talk all things libido with Chloe. So Chloe is an internationally certified somatic sex and intimacy coach and sexual wellness educator. She's the founder of Honey Ed. She's also the host of the Honey Ed podcast, which provides bite-sized sex and intimacy tips for time-poor women. We could all use that. Chloe has helped so many women move from sexual frustration to a thriving sex life and relationship using proven, simple, and easy techniques in less than 15 minutes a week without having to burn the candles at both ends. Welcome to the Self-Love and Pleasure podcast, Chloe.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited.
Woohoo! Do you want to introduce yourself a little bit more to let our audience know who you are?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I'd love to share a little story about my low libido journey. So a few years ago, I was personally struggling with low libido and I felt really overwhelmed with shame. I was constantly fatigued and just trying to juggle life and running a business as well. So I was feeling really deeply unsatisfied in my relationship, and I was just too embarrassed to admit that me, a sex coach, was far from the sex life that I deeply desired and wanted. And I went through a period of blaming myself. I got angry and frustrated with my body and tried everything just to convince myself that it was just part of getting older and being in a long-term relationship. Fast forward to now, I'm in a place where I'm having the most mind-blowing sex that I've ever had, filled with lots of pleasure and more than I ever could imagine possible. I think for me, now I just don't settle for any less than I deserve, and I feel really sexy in my body too. And so I've created Honey ED with the simple mission of providing these bite-sized sex and intimacy tips for time poor women, because we understand that so many of us are juggling so many things at the same time. And just women who don't want to settle for mediocre. I think it's so important that we get the most out of our life. And what I really want to leave a legacy on, and what I really want to help women with, is going from unsatisfying intimacy to a thriving sex life and doing it in 15 minutes a week. So what I want to keep reiterating to women is that it doesn't mean you're putting on an extra heavy thing on the to-do list or taking extra time out of your day that's just not manageable when you've got so many other hats that you're putting on as, potentially a mum or a business owner. And so for me, it was super important to keep it to a limited amount of time, but showing women that you can absolutely still have a thriving sex life without investing too much time into it.
I love that because it takes away that pressure, like you said, because we've already got so many things that we are like putting pressure on ourselves that we're going to have to change this and change that. And we sometimes go over the top and like try to change everything at the same time. So just having that like little bite size, I love that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it's achievable too. I think it's a foreign concept for a lot of people because we're not really taught about sex in this way, and self-pleasure and love and intimacy. We're not taught about it in great depth. So I think we look at it as being overwhelming or out of our conceptually, it might feel like it's going to be something that takes a lot of time out of our day, but it doesn't need to be like that. We can do it in very small increments of incorporating new little habits into our life or into our daily routine that's going to enhance that desire and pleasure into our life, not just in intimacy, but also in the life that we lead as well. I think it's important to mention that.
Yeah, starting small and then you can always build up from there anyway.
Yeah, for sure.
I usually ask my guest speakers at the start, what is their definition of self-love and pleasure, and why do you think it is important?
Okay, so self-love and pleasure, and it's interesting because being a sex coach, often people will often think when you're a sex coach, it's just about sex, it's just about the intimacy. when you're talking about pleasure, but the concept of pleasure isn't just reserved for the bedroom, I don't think. There's definitely that, charge that you get and feeling of pleasure you get from physical touch with a lover or with yourself. But for me, I love deep conversations, and I feel like even things like sweating it out in a hot Pilates class and playing that song, my favorite song, 100 times over and over again gives me like goosebumps, and I feel that energy in my body and those shivers down my spine, which brings me a lot of pleasure. And I think for me, it's about embracing more of those moments. And I think when you have that awareness or self-awareness of what brings you pleasure in your life, you can then lean into it and embrace more of it in your life. And for me, those things bring me pleasure. Of course, intimacy, absolutely, and that connection with a partner. But it starts with us, and it starts with what brings us pleasure in the day-to-day space. And for me, it's those couple of things that really stand out as being really pleasurable and acts of self-love.
Now, we want to talk all the things about libido. And as you've just shared about your personal story of, it's interesting to hear as a sex coach, you have this pressure of like, your sex life has to be amazing and you have to have pleasure all the time. And you can put yourself under such pressure. And I know I feel similar in a way as well, because people want to talk to you about sex and pleasure. So of course you feel like, hey, mine needs to be like on spot. So in regards to libido, can you explain a little bit for our audience? Maybe some have never heard about that word, or just explain what libido is.
Absolutely. So I think when we're talking about libido, I think it skates over into arousal and desire as well. And I think they're all in a similar family, but they all mean something different. And sometimes I will use libido, or I'll use desire or arousal, and depends on the context of a conversation or what we're talking about. But I think it's also important to distinguish the difference between the three, so that we can understand it on a deeper level. I think when we're talking about libido, that's like the baseline of our sexual appetite. So it's like the level of interest that someone experiences. And I think it's like the desire for sexual connection regardless of circumstances. So it doesn't take into account what's actually going on in that space at that particular time. And so the way that I would explain libido is like the overall feeling of sexual desire that person typically would experience over time. So for example, in my case, in the past, I had really high libido, but even if you are or aren't in a relationship and you're actively seeking those sexual encounters, you may have found yourself daydreaming or thinking about sex, which is where I was at prior to experiencing that low libido. Was as a general baseline, I would think about sex on a regular basis. So that's a level of libido that we would talk about, and that constant like feeling of sexual energy that was regardless of the circumstances. And when we're talking about arousal, we're talking about the physiological and psychological responses to certain cues, so to certain things that are happening in that specific moment. So it might be flipping a switch that activates the body's readiness for like sexual activity based on the exposure to those cues. So for example, if you're in the kitchen with your partner and you see them doing the dishes, which is often a very stimulating cue for women, not always, but can be, that is an example of, seeing your partner doing something. It might be engaging in their purpose or their passion. So it's like those particular things that create arousal. So it's like the switch is turned on within us. So that might look like an increased heart rate, blood flow to the genitals, or feelings of sexual excitement. And then when we're talking about desire, we're looking at desire kind of encompasses both the libido and the arousal, but it's also about emotional as well. So the aspects of wanting that sexual connection and emotional connection. So that yearning for intimacy, and it can fluctuate as well. I guess depends on certain factors like mood or relationship dynamics or stress is a big one as well. So yeah, hopefully that gives you a snapshot of the difference between the three, which I think is a good starting point when we're talking about libido, is distinguishing the difference between arousal and desire as well, but they can overlap as well.
Yeah, because I heard sometimes people say like sex drive, sometimes people say libido. So,
Yes.
and then they're like, oh, I've never heard about libido. What's libido? And yeah, I got sex drive, like how you feel, how you think
Yeah.
about sex, like the quality. While we're at that, what is like your way of, I think you've just already kind of mentioned it, like level or measure your libido. How do you know like, oh, this was a high libido, this was a low libido, or this has changed? Like, how do you like go about that?
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. And I want to use my experience as an example of this. When we're talking about like measuring your libido, I think it all comes back to your connection with yourself. I think the type of connection that you have with your own body and your awareness about when there are changes in your body, I think is going to give you a pretty good indicator on when there are drops in that libido or if there's not. So I think when you start to notice things like you're avoiding intimacy or that you're avoiding that connection with your partner, or you're finding reasons why you don't want to be intimate or making excuses, is a pretty good indicator, if you're avoiding it, that you may be experiencing low libido. And I think it's important to really be honest with yourself. You know, you might be at a particular point in your cycle where you're just not feeling it. But if that's been the case for a few weeks, you probably know that it's not based just on your cycle. I think also I'm a strong advocate for self-pleasure as well, and masturbation, even in a relationship. And I think another good measure of libido would be if you're not feeling that desire at all, you know, even when you're on your own and you don't have that desire to self-pleasure, or you're not feeling that pull to have that time alone or with a partner. If it's just not there, I think I'd be asking some questions as to whether or not that is a drop in libido. For me, that's definitely been the case, and that's definitely something I've noticed with clients, is when it's that avoidance and when there's no desire to feel that sense of pleasure with self as well. How about for you? What do you think?
Yeah, probably like similar when you don't even initiate it. So because there is no
Yeah.
want of it, there's no libido. I believe it is really because that kind of leaks into the next question. What do you think is like a healthy libido? So, and personally, in regards to measuring libido, I always think it's really subjective. So
Yeah.
there is not one like this is the range that you're going to have to be in it. I personally think you can measure it by just getting to know yourself, observing yourself. As you said, if you are getting into observing your own cycle, you get to know your own body. You will know that it does drop in certain phases and then comes back up again. But I think it is important, if you do that over a period of time, you will get your own baseline and you will get to know yourself, and you will realize, hey, hang on, I've had such a big, like strong, high libido level there. All of a sudden, true, I'm not thinking about sex. I'm not feeling the desire to touch myself or pleasure myself. I don't feel this desire. Oh, it has dropped. And then you basically can start looking into like, why has it dropped?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's definitely subjective.
Yeah. You are functioning, but you aren't feeling. You hold it all together. Your life, career, motherhood, relationships, and you keep pushing through. You keep managing, doing one thing and another thing, people pleasing, a life on autopilot. And underneath all of it, you ask yourself, is that really it? Is that what's life supposed to be? Your mind rarely stops. You keep overthinking. Your sleep is broken. Your digestion is off. And rest makes you feeling uncomfortable. That is your nervous system stuck in survival state. Your body has forgotten how to feel safe, how to soften, how to receive, how to feel good. And what's missing is not more effort. What's missing is pleasure, somatic pleasure. I am Patricia, an ED/DV survivor, a former nurse, mother, a pleasure explorer, and an award-winning educator in somatic pleasure. I am the founder of Pleasure Lit. My trauma-informed somatic pleasure approach blends nervous system regulation, tantra, sexuality, breathwork, yoga, meditation, identity shift, and feminine embodiment. And if this sparked something inside of you, join us within the Pleasure Lit Woman program, which is my 8-week group program, helping you from functioning to feeling radiant, regulated, and deliciously turned on. You're also invited to join us within the Pleasure Lit Circle, which is my online community membership for women, where we have got live calls, somatic practices, resources, masterclasses, and so much more. You can also explore my self-paced online courses all around pleasure and follow along Patricia's Pleasure Ed for more pleasure tips, and if you like to submit your questions. When you prefer reading, you can get my #1 bestseller book, The Pleasure Lit Way. And if you like more personalized support, book yourself in for a one-on-one coaching session. For more details and how to join it all, go to pleasurelit.com. So in regards to like healthy libido and change in levels, so what do you think is like affecting your libido? What are like the big ones, the common ones?
Okay. So I think a lot of it is our perspective on what is normal and what's not. So I think there's this perception around low libido being something that declines naturally with age, and I think that it's something that we just assume that affects people who are older. And I guess the reality around this is that it can affect people of all ages and genders and sexual orientations, and it's not exclusive to any particular dynamic, like demographic, or group. And so there's actually been some recent studies across a varied number of age groups, and it's determined that younger individuals are actually reporting decreased sexual desire now more than ever, which is concerning. And what can contribute to that change, I think, is that we're not connecting the way that we used to before. So we're not having that time and interaction with people the way that we used to before. So the way I look at low libido is what's normal, like you mentioned, has to come back to what's normal for us. So if we look at a point in your life where you were feeling really satisfied and really comfortable with your level of libido is a good place to start. So finding a place in your life where you feel connected to that libido is really important. To know where your baseline sits. If there was somebody that came to me that's never really had strong desire for sex or intimacy at all in their lives, that would be a separate conversation. But often what you'll get is people will come to me with, they previously had a high libido and they now have a low libido. So for that person, that's not necessarily normal. And there can be obviously many factors. And I think we as women often will blame ourselves, or it will be something that's more reflected on for women as opposed to men, which I think can be a little bit of a challenge. But when we're talking about a healthy libido, we also want to make sure that we're focusing on the quality as opposed to the quantity. I know that when we're sitting here talking about what's a normal amount to have sex, well, that's all dependent on the individual, you know, and there might be people who are having sex 3 times a week, but it may not be satisfying. So I think it's really important that we focus on what is sexual satisfaction to that person, as opposed to a healthy number compared to everyone else. So is it satisfying would be more of a question than what's normal. Is the sex you're having satisfying? And also, I think if you're in a partnered relationship, you also need to be asking both parties. But yeah, I hope that gives you a little bit of clarity around how I would look at what's normal in terms of libido.
I just found it really interesting what you've just mentioned in regards to younger people. There's actually a decrease in their libido level.
Yeah.
And as you've just mentioned, that is concerning, but it's also kind of making sense because we are connecting in a different way. And this is really true. So when I think about it, oh, there's just a summed up here. When I think about it, it is like that technology. We are more on our phones. We are more online.
Yes.
Even when I look at the younger generation, when they meet up, they're like sitting next to each other, but they're on their phones. And then also we're so multitasking now. Like our mind, like what I like to always say to experience more pleasure is to actually slow down, to be more present in the moment. But we are actually the opposite at the moment with our generation. We're just like doing more and like get more done within the hour, and technology while you do this and eating while you do that, and not actually being present. So, and this is probably also a factor why our libido is just decreasing.
1,000%. Yeah, 100. Yeah, I really just agree with you on that. I think it's really important to highlight that it is that we're so much busier than we used to be, and the way that we connect is different too. And it's that instant gratification, that also in the dating space too. I mean, that's a whole different kettle of fish we could talk about, but that instant gratification when things aren't perfect, then it's okay next. It's not embracing that challenge or difficulty, and then moving forward. But I think in my experience, a lot of low libido is contributed to by stress. And I think our stress levels as a society have increased dramatically. And that's from taking on more things. It could also be relationship issues. And like I just mentioned, that just being disposable and kind of, this relationship isn't working. So it's like the next thing. There's a lot of that, not actually investing time and effort into relationships and looking at relationship issues as not being something that you spend time and work on and resolve, or being normal, because relationship issues are normal. And I think a lot of people go, this is, we're having difficulties in our relationship, so this is creating a barrier. So yeah, I think there's that. And then, different health conditions that come up nowadays as well. There's an emphasis on mental health and medications and things like that. There's often medications for like as a solution to a lot of problems, which also create more problems sometimes. Not all the time, but if we're looking at in men, I've spoken about this a bit. With men, often they can be misdiagnosed with erectile dysfunction, but really what it is low libido is actually creating erectile dysfunction. And so sometimes, I'm not saying always, sometimes those particular people can be put on medication, and that is a short-term somewhat solution for the dynamics of the relationship, but what it creates is long-term problems. And also, if it is a low libido issue for men, that actually perpetuates that problem too. So by treating somebody for erectile dysfunction that's got low libido, which could be psychological as opposed to physiological, then that's not actually helping that person come back to a place of balance and what's normal for them. So, yeah, just a few things that I think are important to consider when we're talking about it as a whole, and also, important to mention about men as well, because they do struggle with low libido. It is a challenge for them as well. It's not as accepted for men to have low libido. There's this expectation that men are always just ready for sex, and when they're not, there's something wrong with them.
Yeah, and I think that makes that extra pressure for them. And like, we are all under pressure. It doesn't matter what kind of gender, sexual
Yeah.
orientation, culture, background. As a woman, you have that pressure. As a man, you have that pressure of like, you need to be a certain way, you need to function a certain way. And that extra pressure can really put more stress on yourself, which leads to like a lower libido. And same with body image, for example. Men might need to think they have to have these muscles and that six pack and be ready to go all the time. Women think like, oh, I need to have these, breast to hip ratio and look pretty all the time. So it's that extra pressure of, plus adding, as you said now, these extra diseases, mental health issues, because of the pressure that we are all under and the technologies and like the changes that are coming. We are not built that way, and we are not like made to function in the way that we are heading towards. And it just, stresses us. But what I also found really interesting, what you just mentioned, is that medication, and also going to the doctors and be like, oh yeah, being put on medication. So I'm an advocate for checking out both things, going to the medical professionals, but also to really sit down with someone and have a chat about your situation, because doctors sometimes don't take that into account. They just look at the data and look at the thing and be like, oh yeah, here's a medication, here's maybe an extra test, and then we just go from there. While it would be also good to have a chat about your situation, because what I found interesting is most clients, as you said, now they come with a low libido, oh, something changed. They're surprised sometimes when we just figure out, hey, it's maybe the stress, or it's maybe like just something simple. And when we then just say like, remove this or slow down, and they are just, I thought it would be something complicated. I thought something would be like completely broken or wrong with me. And you're just telling me to like sit there and do sensual eating and being present in the moment. Like, what? But it actually then, when they are going ahead with it, it's just that start of like, hey, hang on, this is actually helping. Like, it brings me into the present moment. And I'm not broken, or I don't need fixing with medications. Well, there are medical issues where you do need that support, but sometimes it's also just, that slowing down and addressing something that is actually happening in your life.
Yeah, agreed. Absolutely. And in my situation, I mean, I wouldn't have, but I could have if I went to the doctor and spoke to them about my low libido. If I didn't have the experience that I have as a sex coach, I would have, could have gone to the doctor and said, I think my hormones are out. I think there's something wrong with me. And I did a shitload of testing, actually. When I had low libido, I went and got tested, with a naturopath, and was like, I don't know what's going on. I think my hormones are out. I don't know what's going on. My skin was different. And what I realized, that it was a combination, and had I have gone on medication, I mean, who knows what would have happened. But what I did realize after all of that was it was a combination of a lot of stress in my life, which was due to relationship issues, right? And what I was able to identify was through getting present in my body, like you just spoke about, was getting present in my body and really understanding myself and connecting with myself on a deeper level. I was able to realize what it was that was creating that low libido for myself. And that's what I help a lot of women with, is if we work out where this is stemming from, it's likely something that we can work through. Not in all situations, but it's worth investigating. And it's worth asking the questions to yourself and getting clear on that before going to that solution as being something like medication, because it adds a complexity to it sometimes too. So there are definitely ways to understand where where you're at and what could potentially work for you by getting back to the present moment and being in connection with yourself, because we really do have the answers within ourselves too that we're able to identify. And I think it's important that we don't give our power away to everyone else, and that we bring that power back within ourselves to actually trust that we do have that information within ourselves in most of the time. And that's about empowering us to tap in with ourselves and get curious about what might be going on.
So we've talked about like what can affect the libido and decrease the libido. So what kind of like practices or tips can you give someone to actually improve your libido?
Yeah, so I did want to talk to mismatched libido a little bit, and then we can definitely look at tips on how to improve the libido, because I think it depends on what is causing the low libido to what we can do. But so a lot of people will come to me with mismatched libido. And the thing that I like to reiterate straight off the bat is that it's absolutely normal to have different levels of libido. And key points to focus on is that open communication and just understanding that we all fluctuate in our libido, and that fluctuation is normal. I think it's when it changes and stays in that place for an extended period of time that I would be more curious about what could be contributing to that. I think also we need to look at how we meet our partner somewhere in the middle, to be able to navigate those differences in libido in the relationship, because it's not the duty of the person who's got low libido to meet the person that's feeling their normal self. And it's also not the duty of the person with the high libido to not be intimate with the other person with low libido. So it's like, how do we find somewhere in the middle that sits okay for both people while we're navigating that? And even, entering a relationship can start one way and then it can fluctuate over time. And there's a lot of different circumstances that can contribute to that too. I think it's important to also create a space in the relationship where you're able to have that open, non-judgmental communication as well. It's a very vulnerable place to be talking about low libido, in particular if you've never been there before, or if you are recently experiencing it and you're used to not, because it's very confronting and it's hard to comprehend. So I think it's important to create that space. And I think an example of, like maybe how you would word it to your partner is saying something like, I value our relationship and I really want to create a safe space for us to talk about our sexual desires and needs openly and honestly. And can we sit down sometime and maybe have a conversation about what we both enjoy in sex and intimacy? And I would be doing that in a setting that isn't in the bedroom. So when you're having conversations about sex and intimacy and you're talking in particular about low libido, it's really important to speak about what is good and what works, and framing things in more of a positive light and speaking from I statements, as opposed to you not blaming and criticizing the partner, because it's going to create more tension and friction on the relationship. So it's like creating that mutual respect and conversation, making sure that happens outside the bedroom, because it just adds that layer of awkwardness if you're talking in the bedroom after you've just been intimate or before you're just been intimate. It doesn't work. And then, just hearing the other person's feelings and thoughts, and if they're coming from a place of I statements and what they're feeling and experiencing, it's important to not only share that, but also to receive it too. And just even reiterating back to your partner what you've heard and acknowledging their feelings around it. And then sharing yours. And the more you do it, the more you practice that, the better it's going to be. And you can come up with really creative solutions on how to meet those needs and desires. And you can explore all different forms of intimacy. I think that's important too, is like, many women don't even, their preference is not actually penetrative sex. It's actually not. Most women like clitoral stimulation. And so it may not be the specific sex that you're having that is not creating that desire and libido. It could actually be, it's not about not wanting sex. It's just about not wanting the sex that they've been having. And that changes. So what worked before may not actually be working now. So it's also a great opportunity to get curious and just find out, maybe my preferences have changed. Maybe what used to turn me on doesn't turn me on anymore. That's okay. Doesn't matter. We can just work with it in a different, use a different strategy to create that pleasure and intimacy in the relationship.
I think it's really great, as you highlighted, that mismatched libido is very common.
Yeah.
And it really does make sense because we are always changing. We are always evolving. And when you have a partnership, you've got two people included in there. So one might go this direction, one goes there, and you always go like in and out, or maybe go on different paths or paths together. And it's always important that you actually check in with each other. And like you said, things can change. Like I could love it that they touch my feet, and all of a sudden it's like, do not touch my feet anymore. Like I'm just not liking it anymore. So
that's also cycle dependent too. Like our cycle. One day you're like, I love it when it gets a little bit rough in the bedroom, or when we like to, test our boundaries. And then the next day you're like, oh my God, don't do that. Like I want you to treat me like a really, a lady. Like, do you know what I mean? Like your edginess could be there one day. Yeah, or don't touch me. Exactly. Or I just want a massage.
I've already made suggestions to, it's always interesting when I'm out and about and I'm saying like what I'm doing as a profession, and they're like, oh my God, I've got this question. And I'm like, all right, shoot. And sometimes I just like give like little nuggets out and suggestions. And one of them was recently to a couple. I said, look, how is your libido and how are you reacting like in different phases of your cycle? And the more we talk about it, she's like, and I'm like, so it might be cycle related. So here's a little tip: if you don't want to like tell your partner that it is now the 10 days or 7 days prior to your bleed, if you don't want to communicate it verbally, how about you come up with a little sign in the house? So you light a candle, or you put up a certain sign, or change the picture around that you've got in the living room, so he knows it is that time. And then in that time, you just make clear you don't want to be touched, or you just want to have it gently, and you don't like to slap on the butt or whatever. So just communicate in a way that will work for you. And she took that tip, and she texted me a couple of days later. She's like, oh my God, this works so amazing. And I'm like, there you go.
I think I heard you mention this on the podcast with Jess around.
Yes.
Yeah, I think fam. Yeah. I feel like I heard you mention that, and I was like, yeah, that is a great tip actually, because I think whilst communication is vitally important, what we need to acknowledge as well, that takes time. And so doing something like this is actually really valuable when you're still warming up to having those open conversations, or if it's a preference, like it's still a way to communicate. It's still okay to do that. And it might be just that lightness that you're bringing to the dynamic of intimacy that it just helps. So it's not like you feel like every time, you're not maybe feeling it, that you can communicate that in a way that feels better. I think that's a really cool example of sharing that information with your partner in a way that's not so in your face.
So obvious, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
They're all things now. They're also calendars that you can put up the fridge, so everybody knows in the household what's going to happen with your moon cycle and your cycle.
Absolutely.
So what are some other tips that you could give to improve your libido?
Okay. So I guess if we break down libido into a few different categories, I think one big contributor to low libido that I've come across with clients is body image. And so when There's been some studies that have shown that positive body image is directly linked with sexual satisfaction and desire. And obviously, on the flip side, that negative body image and low self-esteem can also contribute to that sexual desire and diminished sexual desire and arousal. And I think it's really important that when we're talking about the positive body image and sexual desire, that we look at ways to increase that positive view on our bodies and what we can do to then in turn increase the libido. So for example, that might be on focusing on appreciating your body for all that it does rather than the perceived flaws. So really getting clear on, okay, my body helps me function on a daily basis and helps me show up in this way. It helps me do this. It looks after me when I'm sick. It tries to keep me functioning at a really high level. So appreciation for your body is really important. Also replacing that negative self-talk with affirmations. And I know that affirmations can be one of those things that people harp on when it comes to self-love about, but it actually, excuse me to swear, fucking works. It actually does. Genuinely, for me, for all of the clients that I've worked with, how that looks for each individual is up to them, whether that be a screensaver. I was just looking at my screensaver. You can't see it because I've got some notifications, but my screensaver is, I'm the source of my own power. So that's my affirmation. And I change that consistently. And I sometimes put up a little photo of little Chloe. Or I might put up a different affirmation, whatever that is, it is that constant programming of that positive affirmation that is just sitting there telling me a new story. So we're removing the negative story and we're replacing it with a really positive one. And I would suggest things like putting up those Post-it notes, writing your little affirmation on a Post-it note and putting it on your mirror, or and it is something that you'll constantly you'll notice without realizing that you're noticing it. That can really help with that positive self-talk and positive body talk, and just creating that gratitude for yourself. Also connecting with your body through things like dancing, which is always fun, massage and baths. So you're connecting with your body and you're in the moment and being present with it. I think there's some really good tips when we're talking specifically to body image.
Yeah, some really good tips. I think it really highlights how important it is. It always comes back to yourself as well. So your libido is something that's with yourself. So there's nothing wrong or broken, but it is something to look at your own situation, your own beliefs, your own it's your responsibility to have a look at it and to be able to put little changes into place to actually change it, to improve it.
Agreed. Yeah. And I think that ties in nicely with confidence as well. Like that self-love and self-confidence is vitally important for, the sexual functioning, and feeling confident in your body and your desires it absolutely leads to more fulfilling sex and greater overall satisfaction with your sex life. So when we're talking about self-confidence, there's some self-love practices that you can do that can create more self-confidence. And I think what's important to do is identify and challenge the limiting beliefs about yourself. So if you're feeling that your confidence is low, what are those limiting beliefs or stories that are in your head that are holding you back in your sexuality or in life? And how can we focus on your strengths and accomplishments to boost back that self-confidence and self-esteem? I think it's also really important to communicate openly what your desires and boundaries are as well, if you're in a partnership or even with anyone around you. That confidence, that is a really good way to, whilst it might be uncomfortable, is to start to really express, that boundary to people, is showing that self-love to yourself. And it's really important to do that. If you haven't done it before, it is really important to do it, but also to continually express those boundaries to people and make sure that they're honoring those boundaries, that you're communicating with them.
Very true. Where could people find you, and how can they work with you if they want to like dig a little bit deeper in their libido situation with you or something else?
Absolutely. So I'm on Instagram at thehoneyed.official. And I would be more than happy to chat with anyone in my DMs. I really loved connecting with women. And if you're feeling game, send me a voice memo. I love to chat on there as well. I can also be reached on my website at www.honey-ed.com/links.
Have you got any book recommendations?
I do, absolutely. So even though I'm a sex and intimacy coach, I think this is super powerful. So this is the 5 love languages. This is a really good way to get clear on how you like to give and receive love. And then also, if you're in a partnership, to get your partner to read that as well. Because there's often, we don't know what it is that our partner needs or wants. And I think when we're looking at the relationship and we can really give our partner what it is that they're seeking, the connection increases, that emotional connection, and that openness to intimacy naturally will come from there. So it's a really good starting point.
Love that one. Have you got a number 1 tip or your best tip for self-love and pleasure that my audience need to hear and know about?
I think we've covered a lot of that today. I think it all starts with you. I think it all comes back to how much we love ourselves and how much we prioritize our own pleasure and our own time and connection with ourselves. And I think that is what will contribute to pleasure in every other aspect of our lives.
Yes, love that. Love that. Such a perfect ending to remember and remind ourselves of. It all starts with us. Thank you so much for coming onto this podcast.
Thank you for having me.
All of your wisdom sharing. I would love to hear from you what has resonated the most with you from this episode. You can leave us a comment down below. And when you like this episode, make sure you follow and subscribe to the show, give it a 5-star rating, and also share it along so we can spread more pleasure into this world. You can access my free workshop at pleasurelit.com/links. Sending you lots of love and pleasure. Mwah.